Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kylee Cast. I'm Kylee Griswold, Managing Editor at The Federalist. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have a channel specifically for the Kylee Cast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you are only subscribed to the Federalist Radio Hour or You're Wrong with Molly Hemingway and David Harsani, two of our other awesome Federalist podcasts, be sure you are also subscribed to the Kylee Cast so you never miss an episode. Leave us a 5-star review. It's one of the easiest and best ways you can help out the show. And even better yet, if you're just listening to the show, go check out the full video version on my personal YouTube channel or the Federalist channel on Rumble. And then, of course, like and subscribe there too. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at radio@thefederalist.com. I would love to hear from you as always. Today, I'm so excited to welcome to the show Breccan Thies. He's my colleague here at the Federalist and our White House correspondent. And Breccan recently made a trek to Minneapolis where he went on an ICE ride-along. To say his experience on the ground was a little bit different than what you may have heard from the corporate propaganda media. It's definitely an episode you won't want to miss if you want the real story about what's going on in Minneapolis. So without further ado, please welcome to the show, Breccan Thies. Breccan, thank you so much for joining me today on the Kylee Cast. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always my favorite thing actually to host my coworkers because we all work remotely. And so, we chat with each other on the regular over email and chat, but it's so fun to do a face-to-face interview or as close to face as we can get. So fun having you. Breccan, you were recently in Minneapolis and you got to do an ICE ride along and really just see things with a clearer perspective on the ground than I think probably most of our Federalist readers and most of the people in the country who either are pro ICE or anti ICE. You got a much clearer view of what's going on than really any of them are getting, specifically from the corporate press, which is, of course, skewing everything that's coming out of Minneapolis. So I'm super excited to pick your brain about how it went. I would love to know just off the bat, like what your feeling was going into it. Were you nervous? What was your mindset like before you got on the ground in Minneapolis?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of funny. So I sort of saw both sides of what was going on there. I mean, I spent the first couple of days with agitators actually, and just talking to
Mhm.
them and going around to local restaurants or bars and like kind of getting local chatter, and then seeing what they actually thought about certain things and how what they really believed and stuff like that. And then the last thing I did was the actual ICE ride along. And I mean, I guess I was nervous for different reasons for both of them. I mean, first of all, I mean, my it's so funny. I when I was like telling my mom and my fiance that I was gonna go do this, they were like, "Please don't actually go do that." And I was like, "Well, it's gonna be fun." They're worried about it, so I was like a little nervous because getting married this year, like I don't want to get like beat up by it or like killed by a agitator or whatever. But so I mean, I don't know. I'm not
All
that
the
nervous.
feminine energy stoking fear in your heart and mind.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes,
That's right. But mind
yes.
over matter, we survived, and I did it anyway, despite what they were saying. Because I mean, honestly, it's actually like the most fun stuff you can do sometimes is
Mhm.
even just talking to people, even people who are kind of frankly pretty violent and have pretty bad ideas. It's actually like it's very interesting. But I mean, yeah, it's a little bit like you're just way more alert than you normally are in both
Mhm.
instances. One, because it's like you're there talking to people and you kind of don't want to get made or say the wrong thing, and then their body language changes and all that stuff. And then the other one is like you're with ICE where agitators come every time. Like we did two stops with ICE. Only one ended in an arrest because the other one it wasn't the right person. It wasn't the owner of the car he was driving it, is what it was. But every
Mm.
single time, but that was on the side of the highway. I didn't publish that. Even then, on the side of the highway or on the shoulder, and agitators come over the hill and start filming you out of literally nowhere. And so,
Mhm.
no matter where you go, it's people are coming to make the situation a lot more tense, potentially a lot more violent. And that's something, yeah, I felt it. I can't imagine being an ICE agent and having to do that multiple times a day, every day.
Yeah. When you were talking to the agitators before you did the ride along, is it Was it hard to blend in? I mean, did they just readily talk to you, or are they skeptical of anyone that they don't recognize, trying to make conversation with them?
Yeah, that's
Did
a
they
that's a
assume
good.
you were one of them?
So okay, I am pretty good at acting like I can fit in with people on like the far left. I will say I've been to so many concerts. I grew up going to concerts. I grew up in the music scene, playing music and stuff like that. So these are like pretty familiar people to me.
Mm. Mhm.
So I can kind of blend in and talk like them if I need to and all that. But I also did dress up a little bit differently than I normally do. I mean, I wore like a barista beanie with like hair sticking out and stuff just to like cover my bases, you know.
Your
But
clip-on septum piercing that you wear
yeah,
only on the weekends usually, but yeah, okay.
exactly. So I mean, still though, I mean, there were times where I was wearing, so for the ice ride along, they require you to wear a bulletproof vest, and I was like, well, I'm
Mhm.
probably just gonna wear the bulletproof vest no matter where I went, but I had to figure out how to conceal it when I was going out with the agitators. And talking to them, I mean, it's unless they can kind of see that you have something like that under your jacket, which everyone would thankfully was wearing a puffy jacket because it was like 5 degrees. So
Right.
it's a lot harder to do unless they touch you and feel like a steel plate, which almost happened actually with one of the guys because he tried to like give me a handshake and the hug thing, and then I was like, oh, don't do that, that's not going to be good. But I mean, really, yeah, talking with them, it's the biggest thing is like sort of starting the conversation, right? Where it's like, what's going to happen when I bring up ice to
Mhm.
people who are living in Minneapolis and obviously very agitated and angry about it. Um, it typically just ends up that they are just going to tell you what everything that they think about it. But in terms of being an unfamiliar face, that's actually the most important, or maybe most important, most interesting thing about it is that like all these guys are unfamiliar faces because none of them are from Minneapolis. I mean, some of them
Right.
are for sure, but a lot of the people are bussed in, flown in. Many of them are getting paid very clearly because they're taking weeks and weeks and weeks off of work. They don't
Right.
live there. They don't, one of the guys I spoke to is from Washington State. He's like, yeah, I've been here for a couple weeks or whatever, and he was just manning the Renee Good kind of makeshift memorial that they have there at the site. Where, they have a fire in a fire pit and are serving people coffee or whatever. And it's like, yeah, he just he's just here to agitate. I guess he can afford to do that personally. I doubt it, but so everyone's an unfamiliar
Right.
face, it seems like, and so they don't really. They kind of feel you out in other ways. They ask you about who you are or whatever, and you kind of have to have a little bit of a backstory. So
Right. Well, and that guy specifically that you're talking about at the Renee Good Memorial, I think you included him in your write up, and he also was at the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis, despite not being a local. So clearly, this is just a pattern. Like this is what he does. He parachutes into wherever the agitating is happening and takes part in it. If I'm thinking of the right guy.
that's the right guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. We'll get back to some of the Ice Watch stuff and the people on the ground in a little bit here, but I'm curious, how your perception of things on the ground matches up or does not match up with what the media is painting is going on, or like what obviously at this point people have seen countless videos on social media. Twitter is full of cell phone footage of people recording ICE officers, recording agitators. We've of course seen lots of footage of the good shooting and the Pretty shooting and all these other things. Was your experience, did that match what you're seeing in the media, or is it completely 180 different? Like was it shocking to you, or was it exactly what you expected based on what you'd already seen?
It's a little bit what I expected. Not from what the media was saying about it though. I mean, I think that in general, most of the time, things that you see that are blown up in the media are not actually happening in real time. Now, like there are certain things, for example, where the day, let's see, the Monday, I think I was there from Monday to a Thursday, and the day that I got there was the day that they had started building blockades in a certain part of a certain neighborhood, which was close to where Renee Good was shot, and it was just sort of in a pretty pretty busy area. A lot of people live there, and um, so that was there, and I had seen another reporter from the Daily Caller actually that day, or maybe it was that Tuesday. Either way, the blockade was up, and the people who were manning the blockade assaulted him. Like, actually, and he got it on video. And you're kind of seeing all this stuff going around on Twitter, and you're checking in to see, first of all, where things are happening, but also like how dangerous it is, and trying to make a decision whether to go. And so in that way, I mean, those things do happen. They pop up. Things kind of happen, escalate and de-escalate pretty quickly. So,
Hmm.
when I was there, that was happening. And then the Minneapolis police, the local police actually came in and cleaned up that situation, and threw away all the stuff they were using for the blockade, like pallets and chairs and other things.
Right.
And then the next weekend, there were more blockades. I believe there were more protests outside of Governor Walls's mansion in St. Paul. So I mean, things kind of ebb and flow, and anytime you hear something, it's when something pretty major happens, or there's a major arrest, or something goes wrong. And oftentimes, I mean, um, ICE is running a pretty tight operation, I would say, there, because almost every single one of their arrests, goes well, as it were. Like, it was
Hmm.
done safely and efficiently, and they kind of got in and got out, and that was the way it happens. It's really only when it seems to me there is sort of a convergence of agitators able to get to an ICE arrest and operation at the time they're doing it, because ICE tries to be pretty quick and pretty nimble because of the agitator situation.
Right.
Um, and one of the agitators did actually tell me, he's like, because they have these like street patrols that are on every block, every other block, telling, okay, we see an SUV maybe with dark windows on, you know 34th and Nicolette, and it's headed west or something, and then they'll ping up and down the neighborhood blocks, and they try to get as many people, agitators, to the location as possible in order to disrupt ICE. And so if that converges the way they want it to, it's going to turn into more of a news event. You're going to see a lot more videos come out, because it's going to be people shrieking, maybe assaulting a ICE officer. ICE has had situations where they've actually got an illegal alien in handcuffs, and like an agitator will come in and like rip the ICE agent off of the illegal and trying to like free the illegal and stuff like that. There's a term that they have for it that I can't remember, but uh, I think it's called de-arresting, I think is what they call it.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but anyway. So
Very original.
so yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's they if that happens, then it will be bad. If it doesn't happen, then they just kind of run a normal police operation, and
Hmm.
as it should be. I mean, most of the time, I was making this point when I interviewed the field office director in Minneapolis, and it's like, most of the time you don't hear about ICE operations at all.
Hmm.
In fact,
Right.
the week prior to me going there, there was a arrest operation of almost 700 illegal aliens in West Virginia. Now, of course, West Virginia politicians are and police departments are working with ICE, and that's why you don't
Right.
hear about it, because it all
Right.
went extremely smoothly. The only difference in Minneapolis is that the politicians and the people are making sure it doesn't go smoothly, and that's how you create a dangerous scenario.
Yes, yes, that's such an important point, because the non-sanctuary cities, the non-sanctuary states don't seem to have any problem. It's like the variable here is the agitators, it's not actually the ICE agents, and
Yes,
that's why
correct.
you're seeing it get so violent and out of hand. Um, there's so much to unpack in what you just said. First of all, one thing that you said reminded me of a part in your piece, and that was, you talking about the perception on the ground versus the perception in the media. And it strikes me that even the agitators themselves don't have a clear view of what's happening on the ground, because they themselves are so skewed by the media. And there was one particular part in your write up where you were talking about, I think it's this guy named Josiah, although maybe it was somebody else that had given you this quote, about ICE doing arrests at schools, or like that they needed to keep a careful watch on schools because otherwise ICE was going to go in and get the kids. And it's like, that's just not reality. That's not happening. Like, ICE is not conducting targeted enforcement at schools or churches. So that's just crazy to me, that like even the agitators themselves, they're seeing it with their own eyes, and they don't have a clear view of what's happening at all. So interesting.
They don't, and I mean it's sort of like any I, I don't know, any group chat, any kind of weird social thing where you can kind of snowball yourself into thinking certain things and sort of concoct ideas in your mind. Oh, well, I saw this, and you just sort of. I mean, I had a situation like this from another person in the piece where they just saw a random police officer and they literally started like concocting all of these theories in their mind that were totally untrue. But you know, these all get reported into their group chats. They keep seeing all these things that they think are evil. I mean, on the school point, so that sort of lookout situation I was telling you, that it was Josiah, and he was telling me how that works, which is it works the same thing as the pinging up and down the blocks, but they'll say like, oh well, they're near a school, and you'll have a group of, he said, somewhere around 5 people in high visibility vests at the school, and they'll warn the school administration, and the school will go on lockdown. Like, I don't know if that's actually true. I think that some of what these people think is happening and some of what is really happening is, you know, I think they think that they want to think that they have more control over things like sending a school into lockdown than they actually do. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. You know, ICE doesn't operate near schools. They don't arrest anyone. The only instance I've ever heard of that is the illegal alien who was the superintendent of that school in Iowa, in Des Moines, who they
Right.
did run an operation on him. I don't think they arrested him at school, but I mean, he was like a violent person who had a gun or something like that. I mean, he the way I because I asked the Minneapolis field director, St. Paul field director, that exact question, and he said if there's an actual threat, like any police, you know, authority, we're going to go deal with the threat because you can't have threatening people at a school.
Right.
Other than that, they aren't operating near schools or churches, and so you know, these people have clearly kind of concocted in their mind, they sort of like warped their way of thinking into believing that, oh, ICE is just going and arresting elementary school kids, when that's
Right.
definitely not true. Now, meanwhile, apparently some of these parents are letting their kids get driven home by these random people in high visibility vests in order to avoid ICE or whatever. Now, again, I don't know if that's true, but that is he. Josiah was very adamant that that is exactly what's happening. They're walking teachers to their cars. They're bringing kids to their parents or bringing kids home, and you know, I think that Minneapolis as a city, and the people who actually live there, I mean, they are the most radicalized group of people I've ever witnessed. I did not run into a single person who wasn't anti-ICE who lived in Minneapolis. Not one person. It was pretty absurd.
That's so insane. And yeah, it's the same mind virus that leads you to believe that a 5-year-old is being used as bait, you know, by ICE. That, you
Yeah,
know, this idea that ICE officers are posting up outside the door when the bell rings to demand that brown kids show their papers. Like, it's crazy. It's just not what's happening at all.
yeah.
Um Let's see. So you're talking about these sentries or these people who stand watch, and they will watch for SUVs or like anybody that they suspect of being ICE and send messages and like ping each other up and down the block to basically track ICE movement. I assume this is the same thing as ICE Watch. Like, these two concepts are one and the same, right? Like, that is the group that's doing this, correct?
Yeah, I assume so. I think there's quite a few groups. I mean, even some that are providing people with signs or like kind of cards that say, you know, give you lines to say that the police or something like that. Like I'm exercising my Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. Blah 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 blah. You can't come in here. Or, you know, ICE isn't allowed to conduct operations in our business. Whatever. So there's a couple different operations going on there. Ice Watch is obviously one of them. I mean, you know, Renee Good at the very least we know was part of that. There's
Right.
other ones that are kind of distributing, like I said, those signs, and there's, you know, pamphlets in businesses saying, you know, we're having a community event to learn how to basically get out of being arrested by ICE and things like that. So there's a couple. I think one's called, I mentioned it in the piece, and the name escapes me. It starts with an M, and they're the ones handing out these signs, which is apparently a pretty big organization in Minnesota, that is kind of doing all of this sort of training. And I will say on that point, by the way, um, those sorts of trainings and lines to say to police and signs that they provide businesses to put in their windows is definitely changing the way law enforcement is conducted by ICE in Minneapolis. And the reason is because people who are being detained or arrested by ICE are they feel a lot more confident in their ability to not comply with ICE because they believe that they're armed with this sort of silver bullet, like if I say these words I won't be arrested, which isn't
Mhm.
true. um Number one, but and then number two, they also know that no matter where they're being arrested, a, a massive group of a massive group of protesters will basically give them the sort of like social confidence, if you will, to not comply with ICE. And that is also
Mhm.
an aspect that's not just from agitators. It's like agitators kind of changing the dynamic with the illegal alien they're trying to arrest themselves. So it sort of makes the if you think about agitators being a circle around the ICE like detainment situation, like it makes it dangerous outside the ring and inside the ring for ICE agents.
Mhm.
And that's why ICE has had to, I mean, you know, there were 8, 10 ICE agents to arrest one person. And the reason there are so many people there is because they just know in the middle of a parking lot, which is where the arrest took place that I was witness to. Yeah, people showed up. I mean, there were people everywhere. There were people showing up. They're pulling out their phones. They're on TikTok or whatever, and they're being like, we heard over this one guy like, "Oh, they're about to shoot this guy or whatever," which is just like not true. The guy was
Mhm.
not complying. They did have to break his window to get him arrested, but and then he complied after that. It's like, why would you even why would you even resist when you're not going to like actually resist arrest once you're out of the car? But anyway,
Right.
whatever. People shouldn't resist arrest, but
Right.
it's just kind of funny to think about. But yeah, there's a lot more confidence there with people that just makes it a lot more testy. Like we're going to have to go further. We're going to have to break someone's window. And I heard from one of the ICE agents who I spoke to that that's just not normally the case at all
Mhm.
when they're making an arrest in like pretty much anywhere other uh, than Minneapolis or like anywhere in the country because when you get caught by ICE and you get arrested, I mean, most illegal aliens actually just kind of comply and get arrested.
Mhm.
That's the way it usually goes.
Right, right. So not only do you have the component of these illegals and these agitators all feeling emboldened by each other because you have this safety in numbers, but you also have just this absolute drain of resources of the federal government and local law enforcement because you need so many more bodies to handle. Like you don't just need 2 people now to arrest someone. You need 8 people to arrest the person, and also, by the way, to do crowd control and make sure that you're not going to be make sure that your perp is not going to be de-arrested by a legal observer. For
Totally.
instance. Yeah.
Yeah, and the crowd
Yeah.
control is again 360 degrees around you too. That's the thing
Right.
is like you have to create like a phalanx around the arrest in order to actually make a successful and safe arrest.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about logistically is the blockades. You mentioned that a little bit. So are these set up at intersections or on 2 sides of a street basically to make sure that like ICE can't go through or that it's only ICE watch people who can pass? Or I mean, it's crazy to me because the cognitive dissonance of like, hey, we're setting up a border and we're going to do border enforcement in Minneapolis is so wild, and like just the idea that you can't see how backwards that is just it's laughable to me. But yeah, I'm curious a little bit more about the logistics of how they work, and then I know some of them have been removed, but it seems like the agitators are ready to just put them back up whenever needed, correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. Yeah, it's sort of the old thing, which is like, well, if it's what I think, then it's cool, and if it's what you think, then it's not cool. I mean, that's what they're kind of doing there. They're set
Mhm.
up, they're set up at roundabouts often. So there's some like kind of smaller roundabouts. They're not like full on drive around, but they're the ones where you have to like kind of swerve around.
Mhm.
So there's already sort of a natural, if you will, barrier there, and then they were just able to sort of get pallets or couches and other sorts of things that can like be put in the street. So in the way that it works is you'll have a car drive up, and then they because all these sort of Ice Watch people have access to big Excel sheets that, or maybe they're Google Sheets. I don't know what they're using, but anyway, they're big data sheets that have what they believe to be are ICE license plates in them. So they could be ICE license plates, or they could just be a random person who owns an SUV. Um, Now, I will, and I think ICE also like changes over license plates and has the ability to do that. But anyway, so they have all these license plates. They cross-reference someone's license plate with their database, and then if they aren't in the database, then they let them through. That's kind of how they work. And then the local police, which up until the week I was there, was not working with ICE at all. And now they're sort of starting to in certain ways,
Mhm.
including the sort of crowd control situation, the lawlessness. Because I mean, there's videos of police officers being like, "Hey, we're gonna, basically, we have to disperse you because there might be ambulances or fire trucks that have to get through this neighborhood." And then the anti-ice people will be like, well, they'll obviously be allowed through. And it's like, yeah, well, we don't really trust you to be able to do that. Like, we
Right.
saw what happened in what was it, Chaz Chop in Portland, where people literally did die because ambulances couldn't get to them in time because of the blockade that they had.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like a funny little blockade. I mean, yeah, it was pretty easily taken down, but as you said, they're easy to put back up too,
Right.
kind of
Right.
instantly. And you know, I think they did. At least the one of the accounts online that was sort of organizing a lot of the blockades. It's since been suspended, actually, but it was putting out sort of step by step instructions as to how to create your own blockade in your own neighborhood and have the lookout system and all that stuff. They were really open about it. um, and yeah, I mean, it's just obviously a dangerous situation. You're also, I mean, leaving it up to these sort of extremely lawless, minded anarchist minded people who, you
Yes.
know, may, like I was kind of referring to earlier. If you have someone who is concocting all of these evil things in their minds, like, oh, what if they're hiding ICE agents inside the fire truck like it's a Trojan horse in order to get through? Like, that is not far off from how these people think, and
Right.
they just can't be dealing with that situation.
Right. I just have so many questions about this Ice Watch group and I mean any other groups that are coordinating on this because the more I hear about it, the more I just think this is so sophisticated. Like this has to be more of a top-down type of thing because even these spreadsheets of license plates, like this is such a huge time investment and to have this many bodies and this coordinated of communication. And I mean, I know that these groups have been infiltrated, but it took a while. And it seems to be that like not many people can infiltrate them. So how are they vetting and recruiting and getting, loyal members who have all this time on their hands? Like it seems to me that there's no way this is a ground up thing. It has to be astroturf. It has to be like it's very sophisticated. And it just makes me wonder whether, this has just been perfected because of all of the instances of anarchy, like with the George Floyd riots and all this stuff. Like, have they just been doing this for so long that now it's perfected, that now they just have all of these systems in place? So whenever it's the next time to agitate in a new city, boom, they're just ready to deploy these people. I mean, I'm not even expecting you to have answers to these things, but it is just so wild to me. The more I learn, I'm just like, this is not like a few radical people who have time on their hands. This is a well orchestrated, well oiled machine in operation here. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's totally organic. It's I think it is pretty much what you described. Now, here's the thing: we could and should know, but it'll take the serious about actually investigating these groups, which they've said they're going to do a million times, and we've seen basically zero from that infiltrating all of the money sources. And there have been very minimal arrests of people, and the arrests they have of people are people who are actively being violent in the moment, not people who are kind of, call them lieutenants in the sort of hierarchy that they almost certainly have.
Mhm.
Not enough is known about them, and that's a huge part of the problem. There have been some reporters who have infiltrated some of the group chats. Who then I think someone at City Journal did that for several months, and so the best information we have is what individual reporters have been able to spend their day to day doing when that's which is one person basically with Google and like a
Right.
signal chat. I mean that's totally insufficient to be able to take down these anarchy groups. And I have no idea why we haven't heard anything from the federal government. Who, the Trump administration said Antifa is a terrorist organization. It's like, well, you're certainly not treating them like one yet that we know of. We have seen
Right.
again zero arrests. So I don't know. My inkling, just from some of the people that I've talked to now, maybe this is just a there's this like hive mind in Minneapolis and in probably Seattle and Portland and things like that. But some of these people were around during George Floyd. Maybe they've been around since Michael Brown or something like that. And when we had riots for years on end, I think people forget about the Baltimore riots after the
Mhm.
Freddie Gray incident. I mean, there have been these kinds of like race or similar riots across American cities for a long time. So I think a lot of these people are known, and
Mhm.
they can be called upon, and maybe they have jobs that allow them to be relatively transient, where they could be like, "Oh, I'm going to take off X amount of time," and then they're going to get paid by all of these huge funders, whether it's Soros or Ford Foundation or Kellogg or all the big names that are totally involved with these left-wing agitating groups, or maybe they're groups that we don't even know about, and we
Mhm.
should, because the federal government hasn't done a whole lot. I think that the question you're asking is the main question. Why do we have
Mhm.
to deal with this anarchy every other year? Why is it that it gets worse in the summer than in any other time of the year? And I know people are going to say, well, it's cold in the winter. It's like, yeah, it's cold in the winter, but you know who all else is not working in the summer is teachers. Like, where are the teachers unions with this thing? Because
Mhm.
teachers get off the whole summer, and other people who do seasonal work, and then maybe the next season is the protesting and rioting season. They get work that way too. I remember
Mhm. Or
um
during election years, that's another
yeah,
classic, like, "Oh,
exactly.
shocker, it's a midterm year." Yeah, yep.
Yeah, that's exactly
Sorry, I
right.
cut you off.
No, no, no. I was gonna say. I mean, I remember. I went to school. I'm here. I told you before we started recording. I'm here in Charlottesville. I was here. I went to school down here during the Unite the Right rally, and I remember there were Craigslist ads for getting like paying riders, like, hey, be a rider for today and we'll give you
Mhm.
like $800 or something like that. There were actual Craigslist ads down here. They that was also another inside job with the state police, the National Guard and the local police, because they're all run by Democrats, and they gave stand down orders for the purposes of it turning violent, which we all know it did. And
Mhm.
that was sort of the first test. Remember, that was a couple months into the first Trump administration,
Mhm.
and the mayor, maybe a little bit earlier in that year, said we're going to be ground zero for resistance to the Trump administration. Then in a couple months, they were able to orchestrate something that was pretty significant, and everyone still remembers now. I mean, yes, these are sophisticated groups. These are not organic. These are totally kind of now getting more technologically advanced too. I mean, I guarantee you, to deal with the getting bodies to an enforcement operation problem, I mean, they're going to start seeing how many vehicles they can get. They might be starting renting vehicles so they can caravan as many agitators to a location as possible without people having to do it on foot. There are
Mhm.
already cars that will follow ice vehicles around. We got when I was there with them, we got followed down and like made by several cars, because these people are just on the corners of every street, and they'll just start following you, and then you just hear over the police radio, like, yeah, we got a couple of people following us, we got to shake them. And so you got to drive a weird way around the neighborhood and try to find a new spot to do some surveillance or whatever on the next kind of target to arrest. And it's constant. People are looking out of windows, and the police have to have lookouts, with binoculars, looking at all the windows to make sure that they're not being watched, and then kind of told about the group chat. I mean, it is everywhere you look. It is inside the city, and it is every single person that I saw there was just ready and willing to stand in the way of all this.
Well, and I think what's so frustrating for so many Americans, I know for us, but I think a lot of people who think like us too, is like it's this lack of action that we're seeing from the federal government on this, from the FBI, from the intelligence agencies. Like, you have a handful of reporters doing the hard work of like infiltrating a group chat or whatever. Like, they're getting information despite having limited resources, limited funding, whatever. And meanwhile, you have the federal government who's, yeah, like sending letters and writing white papers and designating groups as terrorist organizations. And it's like, okay, sure, that's a start, but like, where is the action? Why are we seeing no arrests? Because, use the word anarchy, and that is absolutely the appropriate word to use for this. These are anarchist groups. And I just think about like what people who were non-violent protesters at the January 6th Capitol demonstration, what they were subjected to for far less, like far less. And it's just like, if the federal government would devote a fraction of the resources, like a fraction, to do anything about these anarchist groups, it would send such a powerful message, and it would just be such a demonstration of force that we honestly desperately need to see, because this kind of stuff is not going to stop. You're going to see more non-player characters like Renee Good and Alex Preddy be sent to the front lines of these, riots, and more people are going to die and more stuff is going to happen because the federal government is not taking the action that they need to designate these groups as what they are and then actually take action. Like, if you are going to say that Antifa is a terrorist organization, yes, agree. If you're going to say that Ice Watch is an Antifa or is a terrorist organization, yeah, really seems to be that way, then why are you not treating them like terrorists? Like, a designation is not enough. And we just need to see like a fraction of effort from the federal government on this, specifically like the FBI and the intel agencies. And I think it's really demoralizing and frustrating for Americans who it's just like, yeah, I hear you. And we just kind of roll our eyes because it's like, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. And it's just going to continue.
Totally, it is going to continue. It's going to get worse too. I mean, Alex Preddy and Renee Good, these people, the left, the anti-ICE people. I mean, they're thrilled when someone like that dies. They absolutely love it when someone like that dies because it gives them so much more fodder to be more violent. And people like that shouldn't be put in this situation to die. Not because they're not going to put themselves in that situation. Obviously, they will. I can't remember who wrote it for the Federalist, but someone said that these people are willing to die for like illegal aliens, and so but that can't get in front of law enforcement operations. Like, we need a surge of more people in places like Minneapolis to make sure that unfortunately you have to have more people in order to get in the way of these people who are trying to put themselves in line to getting killed, because a lot of them, I can't speak to what Alex Preddy, Renee Good were thinking at the time, but a lot of them sort of don't mind getting killed, or the idea of it at least, and will put themselves in pretty dangerous scenarios because it helps the cause. I mean, totally agree with everything you were saying. It is really unfortunate that the federal government is not, I mean, surging anything. They're not, seemingly, the FBI is, no one's even hearing from the FBI. I'm a little bit concerned that the Trump administration, and perhaps President Trump himself, and other kind of people who are looking out for the political fallout potentially from whatever enforcement operations look like. I mean, you've seen the Trump administration sort of back off a little bit in Minneapolis. The day I got there was the day that Tom Homan announced that they were taking 700 federal agents out of the city. Whether people are looking toward the midterms or not, for the elections, I'd say that that's probably true. Maybe there's some other considerations there, but I heard an interesting thing, and I can't remember where I heard it from, but that uh, you know Republicans might get slaughtered in the midterms. They could. I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that the setup is for the midterms, though. I think the setup's probably got to be for 2028. You have a little bit longer. I mean, it's typical for the party that just got elected to the White House to get slaughtered in the midterms. That's just
Right.
how it works, and it's on a cycle. In a similar situation, look back to 1972. I think in 1970, this is when Richard Nixon was president. I think in 1971 was when Kent State happened, and there were like massive riots at Kent State. And when Nixon sent the National Guard in, the National Guard shot a couple of people at the Kent State riots. You know, that the whole history of that has been totally bungled, but that's not even why I'm bringing it up. It was a similar situation, and it was the year before a presidential election year, and the very next year was the biggest landslide that any president has ever won. Richard Nixon won re-election in the biggest election victory ever in history to this day. So I don't think you can. I think enforcement is probably the better bet if you want to be winning elections. If you want
Hmm.
Republicans to show up and start voting for you, people need to start seeing better numbers than 600,000 deportations. That sounds great, but we're talking about 20 to 35 million illegal immigrants in this country.
Hmm.
600,000 is not going to cut it at all. It's not particularly close.
Right. And honestly, I'm so tired of these political expediency arguments because you're so right about what usually happens in the midterms. Like, we need to think past the midterms for a handful of reasons. One, we're probably going to lose in the midterms anyway because Republicans outside of immigration enforcement are giving voters nothing to vote for. So, like, if you don't deliver on this, you're not delivering on anything else. So, why would anybody vote for you anyway? Plus, typically, the party out of power, out of the White House, is the one that makes gains in the midterms. Beyond that, though, it's like, okay, sure, you might get trounced in the midterms because you have a bunch of Instagram moms who don't like the optics of deporting people. Okay. So those are the people who are emotionally blackmailing you and holding the administration hostage right now, which is so frustrating to me. But it's like, okay, sure, you might lose a few seats in the House. You might take some hard losses in the midterms. If you do not run with the mandate that the American people overwhelmingly gave you in 2024 to crack down on border enforcement, deport people who have no right to be here, and basically like reclaim national sovereignty, you can kiss goodbye ever winning any election again, because this is going to affect how our numbers and congressional reapportionment go in the next census. Like, you're just welcoming untold numbers of anchor babies. Like, the numbers that blue states are going to be able to get, like, we will never win another election again if we don't get this right. So the idea that it's like, oh no, but we might lose a couple seats in the midterms, yeah, well, you were going to lose them anyway because Congress isn't doing jack squat and we have a Republican in the White House. Like, deliver on the mandate. Do the thing that the majority of the American people elected you to do, and that's to deport, and that's to crack down and to maintain law and order, to ensure that we don't have any more Laken Rileys and Jocelyn Nungarays. And I'm sorry if it looks a little unpleasant in Minneapolis to get the job done, but at the end of the day, it's what we already talked about. Like, immigration enforcement is not the problem. It's lawless agitators being spurred on by the likes of Tim Walz and Jacob Fry that are the problem, which is why Minneapolis is a flashpoint and not, West Virginia or literally any other state where the local police comply with ICE and enforce the law to carry out deportation orders. So I digress. I mean, it's just such an important thing. And I fear that we are just, the optics problem is so stupid. And I'm so tired of the political optics being part of the equation or being like a determinative factor in how we carry out immigration enforcement.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there are a lot of people who I won't name who I know who work in the Trump administration. Lower level political appointees. I don't think know a single person who isn't very angry. I will say that the Insurrection Act didn't get invoked pretty much immediately, which it should
Yeah.
have, obviously, on Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, and sort of every other agitator who was aiding it, whether they were funding it or whether they were active themselves. You know, it should have been a what they call in the Bush administration shock and awe campaign in Minneapolis. The moment it turned bad, and everyone knew it was going to turn bad because it's Minneapolis. They
Yep.
do this. This is their bread and butter. They love doing this. They don't have much else to do apparently, and it should have happened immediately. I don't know if the sort of détente that it seems that the Trump administration is trying to reach with them is a political thing, or maybe President Trump is doesn't want to get impeached for a third time. It's like, well, I don't know that détente in Minneapolis is going to stop an impeachment. Like, if there's a one person majority in the House of Representatives for the Democrats, you can bet you're getting impeached multiple times. You're going to get
Right.
impeached for the next 2 years or until whoever, there's a different majority. You're going to get impeached. You're not going to get removed. You're going to get impeached for literally anything and everything you do. So it's the same thing. Like, don't worry about the midterms. Don't worry about getting impeached. Like, just own that might happen, and do the mandate that the American people want you to do. Because if that doesn't happen, then 28's gone, and the retribution campaign from the Democrats, if they get back the White House in 2028, is going to be insane. I mean, people, they are going to arrest people. They are going to get for no reason. You know, the people that the Trump administration should be arresting like actually deserve to be arrested. And just like with January 6th, or with, you know, invoking the FACE Act on praying nuns outside of an abortion facility, you know, yeah, their people are going to get perp walked. They're going to get you know, their SWAT teams are coming to their house at 3 a.m. who don't deserve it. It's going to look pretty bad. So I think that the Trump administration is going to be remembered. Maybe they're thinking of legacy. They're going to be remembered a lot more for setting up the right in our country for complete and total failure and domination in 2028, unless they kind of deal with this immigration thing and show that they're actually dead serious about, as you said, taking our country back, making sure that our congressional districts aren't heavily weighted toward having illegals. And so California has an enormous amount of power that is entirely made up of illegal aliens. Like, they have,
Right.
I think it's like they have like 6 or 8 too many congressional districts in California because of the illegal alien population
Right.
there alone. And then you talk about Illinois, and then you talk about New York, and it's the same situation there. You know, this is existential. It actually is
Mhm.
existential. I know everyone loves to say that, like, this is the most important election or whatever. This is the most important thing. But, like, I mean, we're getting to a point where we don't really have, some people don't want us to have a country, and other people are wondering where their country went and if people are going to be serious about it. So,
Mhm. Yep. And it's really important that we get the messaging right on it too, because the elections point is such a huge component of this. But it's not just about keeping our elections safe and secure from non-citizens voting. Not that that doesn't happen, because we do have plenty of documented instances of this happening. But the problem is the apportionment. The problem is that people who have no legal right to be here are currently included in our census, which is how you get political power, which is why, of course, you have sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. It's the whole point. It's about political power. It's not about compassion for non-white people. And it's such an important thing that, like, a lot of Americans who are swept up in the media propaganda don't even know that. They have no clue about that political reality. And so it's just so important that we like communicate the importance of these issues, because they are not like side issues. Like this will determine the future of the country for decades to come, by people who have no legal right to be here. And it's just really important that we get our messaging right on that. So,
that's exactly right. Just to add to that exact point, I mean, you know, if you're wondering why Minnesota is the way it is, it's partially because they retained a congressional district that they shouldn't have by like 75 people in the last sentence. So they were about to lose a congressional district, and they were 75 people away from doing it, and they this time around. You know, if you deport 75 illegals from Minneapolis, they lose a congressional district. I mean, that's that would happen around the country in all of these states that have imported so many of these illegals. So just to,
mhm.
you know, they're thinking about that because their political power, their national political power, goes down when they lose congressional districts.
Mhm. Which is so interesting because, you're always gonna have fights over redistricting, which is what we're seeing, with Indiana and Texas and Virginia. And, of course, the Democrat states are much more apt right now to redistrict, which is how you ended up with, Abigail Spanberger days into office, like, redistricting to make sure half of the Republican state is represented by only one congressional district versus 10 allocated to Democrats. So, of course, like, there are political ways to do this that are like, legal but unsavory and are frequently contested, in the courts. But when it comes to immigration, it's inherently illegal. Like, it is legalized because we count non-citizens in the census, but they are not legally allowed to be here. And so, it's like a non-starter. Like, we shouldn't even have this question, because it's like, well, just deport them. Like, it's not, it results in political outcomes, but it is an important thing to do regardless of whether you're a Republican or Democrat. It's like, go home. You are
Yeah.
you are not allowed to be here. Like, you have broken the law. Goodbye. Okay. Um Okay, we like went down this rabbit trail for quite a while, but I think it's such an important thing. But
It is.
I want to pull back a little bit to the local law enforcement cooperating with ICE. So I know before you were there, local PD was doing nothing to help with ICE and immigration enforcement at all. But I know that's changed a little bit, and I'm curious what you observed on the ground as far as like what local PD is doing or not doing as it relates to these deportation efforts.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a bare minimum thing. Now, the main thing that's changed is, so ICE, Department of Homeland Security, has a thing, I think it's called 287G. It's like an agreement that a local or state or both police force can enter with ICE in order to basically help ICE operations on the ground, whether that's reporting that illegals that they pick up for other crimes for detainers, or actually helping with the on the ground enforcement. Now the Minneapolis police are not doing that, and they're still not doing that, and that's been a major point of Jacob Fry, who's obviously in charge of them. Um, but I asked the field office director in St. Paul that exact question, and he said that first of all, the cooperation with local police is better than it's portrayed in the media. But there have been significant issues with trying to get them to cooperate. But it's even gone down to, I mean, there were reports of it used to be really bad, and now it is slightly better. So there used to be reports of basically off-duty ICE officers, or maybe they were on duty but they were like grabbing lunch at a restaurant or something, and then they were in uniform, and a bunch of agitators come and start making the situation extremely dangerous, and they can't leave because they're blocking their ability to leave. ICE officers call police, and the police just literally don't respond, and leave the ICE
Mm,
officers there to out to dry. And again, a situation where these ICE officers could be killed. I mean, you don't know. Alex Preddy had a gun on him.
right.
What if another person has? Not that he shouldn't have. Honestly, like a lot of people say that you shouldn't have had a gun. You can have a gun, but like these people are very crazed, and so they might be dangerous. Um, but but now apparently they will respond to those calls, is what I was told, which is again a bare minimum thing, but
Bare minimum. Yep.
that's a happy thing, I suppose. And then the other thing is that they are not going to help ICE do immigration enforcement. They are going to support ICE in the crowd control
Okay.
department. So that's sort of the biggest thing. That's the reason why Customs and Border Protection officers were there in the first place, because they didn't have the support from local police, and so they had to send in more federal agents to create that phalanx I was describing earlier.
Mhm.
Um, like I said earlier too, the local police were the ones who took down the barriers and the
Right.
blockades and things like that. That may or may not have happened otherwise, because I mean that is just an actual concern aside from the ICE situation.
Right.
But that sort of thing, it seems like there's a little bit less lawlessness that's going to be just allowed to happen in the city. And I mentioned this in the article that I wrote. I mean, that seems to be the function of the Minneapolis government and police force, is that like the anarchy is allowed to happen for a long period of time until it gets a little bit too hot, and then the government sort of springs into action and acts like, oh yeah, we've been here the whole time, and they sort of tamp it down, but they don't really kill it, so to speak. That's sort of the ebb and flow. That's part of the whole dynamic in Minneapolis of like these actual dyed-in-the-wool anarchists who push the envelope until the local government is like, that's a little bit too far. Like we're willing to work with you guys up until a certain point. So that seems to be the situation. What it remains to be seen. When I was there last week, that was when all of this stuff was changing over, and so
Mhm.
the Tom Homan had just gotten there. He had, the agreement, I guess, is taking away 700 federal agents, because they've gotten agreements with Jacob Fry and Tim Walz, and I think it just remains to be seen at this point. It'll be interesting to see if and when the next sort of major confrontation happens, and how local police interact and react to that. We've seen a couple of instances of agitators outside of hotel rooms where they believe ICE officers are staying and stuff. And that used to be a situation that they would just let slide, and now it looks like they're responding and kind of like dispersing the crowd in those situations. So again, it's bare minimum stuff, but it is better than it was. I mean, you're talking about putting the lives of a bunch of federal agents who are there doing their job at risk just to gain political points because you want the situation to spiral out of control. That's the game. That's the playbook of Jacob Fry. That's the playbook of Tim Walz, and you know, yeah. Again, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have to keep tabs on it moving forward here. We've been talking for almost an hour, and we've barely even touched on your ICE ride along experience. So, let's chat about that for a minute. First of all, I would love to just hear. You originally were supposed to do a ride along on a different day, but you had to move it. Can you explain why you had to move the ride along and kind of what happened there?
Yes. So I was there Monday through Wednesday, left early on Thursday, and I originally had my ice ride along for the Tuesday, so in the middle of it. And but I also had planned on, as I did, go out and talk to agitators and things like that. I was told by numerous people inside of the Department of Homeland Security and outside of the Department of Homeland Security that if I'm planning to go out and into the city as just even a civilian, not even going to the agitators, as a civilian, because there are so many people in these group chats and stuff like that, that I should not do that after I've been seen in a ride along with ICE. So they
Mhm.
told me that pretty much it was going to be unsafe to do it on Tuesday and then go out and into the protests or talk to the agitators on Wednesday, um, because you're just going to get attacked. My face is all over their group chats because I have been filmed with being a reporter with ICE. I don't have a mask on, but all the ICE people have a mask on, and so my face is all over their group chats now. It's like literally the last thing that I could do in Minneapolis was the ICE
Yeah.
ride along because of that situation. So I had to change it up, which ended up being fine, and it did it on Wednesday. And as soon as I got back from it, um, uh, I stayed in my hotel pretty much the whole rest of the night until I went to the airport. I will say the other thing. Oh, this is kind of part of that point is there are there are agitators outside of the federal building where ICE is staged like 24/7, and they are taking pictures. That's how they get all the license plates. They're taking pictures of everyone's license plate going in and out of the federal building, sending it
Mhm.
into their group chat. They are taking pictures of everyone's face, sending it into their group chat. So when I showed up in a rental car to pull in, I mean, it's just like a paparazzi of people taking pictures of you and making sure, because then that's where you stage and you leave through there too.
Right.
So that's I unfortunately how it is, and but everything ended up being fine. But like you don't really think about those contingencies until someone's like, oh, you really shouldn't, like, you're gonna get doxxed, man, if you do that. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, everything turned out to be fine, but probably because you did your ride along on the last day. So I'm sure
Yeah.
that was an important component of that, everything being fine. Yeah, so let's talk about what happened during the ride along. I would love to hear about what that looks like kind of
Mhm.
procedurally with the officers and yeah, just what kind of stuff you did.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because it's a lot of nothing and then a short amount of something. So the first mostly two, I was there for about 3 hours. The first 2 hours of it were sort of watching and waiting, and they'll be reading license plates, and they're reading license plates themselves, and they're running it through their a couple of different databases they have of like kind of known illegal immigrants, because illegal immigrants can get driver's licenses and cars for some reason. And so anyway, they have that information, and then that's how they get a lot of the people that they're arresting. Is they'll run plates and they'll be like, oh, okay, so we have a person of interest here. That if they have a rap sheet, the rap sheet will show up. Whether it's like a DUI, the guy that they arrested when I was there had a DUI. It could, DUI is sort of the tip of the iceberg of what some of these people have committed. Murder, rape,
Mhm.
things like that. And then they'll go and they'll sort of try to build um, they're trying to build like a profile of what their day to day looks like. So it's just like kind of standard police work, right? You got a
Mhm.
plate, you got a person of interest that you want to arrest, and you kind of follow them to see what their day looks like. Maybe you find out where they work. That was the case with the person that was arrested when I was there. They found out, I think, the day before, that he works at the McDonald's, and that his shift is 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so we were literally waiting for him to get off of work at 1 p.m. to go make the arrest, while kind of tracking other people down, running plates. We did pull, I mentioned briefly, we pulled over another person on the side of the highway that had a plate, but that person was actually legally in the United States. They were given some sort of status. I don't believe it was citizenship, because the person, once again, was not complying with ICE officers. And if you're given legal status by the federal government, you are required by law to show an ICE officer your ability to be in our country. And
Mhm.
this guy wouldn't roll his window down, and then once he did, he was just like, he was just filming, and the ICE officer was like, well, yeah, you're on camera too, like, we're on camera, we need to see your ID. And the guy kept refusing to see the ID, and all the rest of it, just not complying. Nothing ended up happening to him, even though he might, if that had gone on further, they probably should have arrested him. But he eventually showed his ID, and he was a citizen. But that's the kind of thing where these guys just don't, they feel confident to not comply, and that's what they do. And so and then after that, the guy that ended up getting arrested got off work, once again did not comply. Now, that was in a bit of a public setting. I mean, it was in the parking lot of a McDonald's, and the ICE officer I was with was like, we might get a crowd here, because
Mm.
it's in the middle of a parking lot and not on the side of the road, where you're going to get less of a crowd, although still a crowd. And we did. And so the McDonald's workers come flooding out. Some dude parks his car and starts screaming at the ICE officers, and other dudes behind, uh, filming a TikTok reel or whatever they're called. And, the whole thing is very chaotic. And then the guy himself, again, was not complying at all. They had to break his window. What I showed, or I posted a video of the, like, breaking the window through arrest thing, but the full video is like ICE officers in English and Spanish for about 3 or 4 straight minutes being like, we need you to roll down your window and show us your ID and all the rest of it. I mean, the guy was going to get arrested one way or the other, because they're not just
Right.
going to be like, oh, well, you won't comply. Guess we can't arrest you now. So he's being told to comply this whole time. The guy's feeling confident enough to not do that, and then had to end up breaking his window, and then he just got brought in for, and I don't know what his status is now. But he's just being processed and deported, I assume. So
Right. It is so important just to see though how this kind of stuff works, because it's like you said, it's police work. Like these are federal officers putting in the time to make sure they have the right person, to identify people who have no legal right to be here, and to clearly this is somebody who had broken additional laws in addition to immigration laws, and then go through a process to lawfully remove them. I mean, I've heard so many ridiculous fantasies from anti-ICE people who are making up stories about how this is going down in Minneapolis. Of course, partially stoked by the media because they're just painting this false picture of what's happening. But this idea that the Gestapo are going door to door in Minneapolis looking for people who don't have white skin and then demanding their papers. And it's like, that's clearly not what's happening here. It's important. We're getting so many human interest stories from, everyone else, Renee Good, we're hearing that she's a poet and, a mother and all these things. But it's like the ICE agents who are doing this difficult work to undo years of lawlessness under the Biden administration to protect American citizens and our national interests. They are human beings too. They need to be humanized, and they're doing really important and dangerous work every day. So it's super cool to get an inside look at that through the eyes of Breccan, who got to ride along and experience it firsthand. So um I think we're at time, Breccan, so I'll wrap it with that. But thank you so much for not only staying safe and defying your fiance and mother's wishes that you not go, but also for sharing all of your stories from on the road with us. Super fascinating stuff. Everybody should go read Breccan's piece at the Federalist, all of his reporting, but specifically this piece from Minneapolis. It's called Checkpoints and Street Corner Sentries. In Minneapolis, ICE-hating anarchists are an occupying force. Thanks again so much, Breccan. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Kylee Cast. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. It would be a great way for you to help out the show. Go read Breccan's article. It's linked in the show notes. I will be right back here next week with more. So until then, just remember, the truth hurts, but it won't kill you.